So if I could get a volunteer to read chapter 23,
I can
anybody?
do that.
Thanks, Don. What translation are you going to use?
That's a good question. Probably the the NIV.
Okay, good choice.
All right, so Job chapter 23. So I've got a heading. The heading in the Revised Standard says, Job replies, My complaint is bitter. Then Job replied, Even today my complaint is bitter. His hand is heavy in spite of my groaning. If only I knew where to find him. If only I could go to his dwelling. I would state my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. I would find out what he would answer me and consider what he would say to me. Would he vigorously oppose me? No, he would not press charges against me. There the upright can establish their innocence before him, and there I would be delivered forever from my judge. But if I go to the east, he is not there. And if I go to the west, I do not find him. When he is at work in the north, I do not see him. When he turns to the south, I catch no glimpse of him. But he knows the way that I take. When he has tested me, I will come forth as gold. My feet have closely followed his steps. I have kept to his way without turning aside. I have not departed from the commands of his lips. I have treasured the words of his mouth more than my daily bread. But he stands alone, and who can oppose him? He does whatever he pleases. He carries out his decree against me, and many such plans he still has in store. That is why I am terrified before him. When I think of all of this, I fear him. God has my heart faint. The, God has made my heart faint. The Almighty has terrified me. Yet I am not silenced by the darkness, by the thick darkness that covers my face.
Thank you. So there are two different ways that people interpret this chapter, and I know we've been in it now for a couple of weeks, but I should mention the two different ways so that you know what how I'm handling it, and if you see it differently, um, it's because there are two ways that the text doesn't eliminate. There are two ways. They're both can be seen there in the text. The one way is to see Job as um, seeing a little glimmer of hope at the very beginning, verses what uh, 6 and 7 in the NIV. Would he vigorously oppose me? No, he would not press charges against me. There the upright can establish their innocence before him, and there I would be delivered forever from my judge. Glimmer of hope. Both views see that. Job is presently in what he describes as darkness. We see that at the end of the chapter. He describes his present situation and what he foresees as the future as darkness. And he resolves in this chapter to continue on in his present way of life, specifically in following the footsteps of the Lord, as he describes it, in this darkness. And it's darkness to him because he doesn't, because first it's darkness is usually associated with judgment and suffering. So he's in that situation, but also because he can't find God and he doesn't know where to find God. And um, so both views start out with Job in darkness sees a glimmer of hope. The glimmer of hope is that an upright man can have a hearing before God and that God will receive him and not oppose him. Uh, and so all will be well, we might say it like that. And then both views are going to have the end of the chapter as Job is resolving to continue on in his present way of living in relation to the Lord, and to and so here's where the differing things is. He's either resolving to push through the darkness to get to uh, the the thing he's hoping. So you might think of it like this: he, on that view, he understands or believes or hopes, um, whichever degree of strength you want to give it. Let's say he hopes that God will vindicate him, that at the end of all of this, God will receive him well and restore him and vindicate him. That's his hope. And so he's not giving up at the end of the chapter and saying, it's just a terrible thing. God's against me. He doesn't change in his behavior toward me, because maybe we should look at that verse. So down in verse 13, so the ESV or the NIV has, but he stands alone and who can oppose him? He does whatever he pleases. He carries out his decree against me, and many such plans he still has in store. That is why I'm terrified, right? So Job is saying here, there's no disagreement about this. Job is saying, God has a plan. God is set, and he is opposing me. I'm suffering at the hands of God, and he's going to carry out his plan. He's going to continue doing what he's planned to do. And so then on track one, what happens is Job says, there's no hope, but I'm just going to keep living the way I'm living. Anyway, he hasn't silenced me. I'm not silenced by this. I'm just going to keep living the way I'm living, even though there's no hope of ever um, being received back into God's favor. That would be track one. So it ends in despair. And we've seen other chapters in the book of Job which seem to end like that. It started out really good and bright and happy and looked forward to God's reconciliation with God, and ended up in utter despair. And so one half, or one of the main views of understanding the chapter, is Job ends in despair here. Um, so you could just say he's kind of that little glimmer of light at the beginning that Job hoped for vindication, that's been snuffed out. He realizes that God is set against him. God's not going to change. Um, in the ESV, verse 13, but he is unchangeable, and who can turn him back? He's unchangeable. That's the more literal understanding of what's going on there. The NIV is doing an interpretive paraphrase, but the actual word there is the word for one, as in, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And the connotation of that verse, Deuteronomy 6:4, is that the Lord is alone and unique and unchangeable, and he's unchanging because he is who he is, and there's nobody that can change him. So that's how the ESV is translating this here. He is unchangeable. Who can turn him back? So on the second main interpretation of the chapter, the one that I believe is the correct interpretation, is that Job is asserting at the end, when he says that he's not going to be silenced, and when he says that even though he's in the darkness, and that God is going to carry out all of these plans against God, which apparently, and I think obviously, mean here plans to continue to uh, look like he's Job's enemy, that Job is saying, despite the fact that God is going to keep doing this, I know that at the end I'll be received. And so I'm just going to keep living the way I've been living. And he makes a contrast with the wicked a little bit later in chapter 24, who don't follow the way of the Lord, who don't walk in those paths. But Job says of himself in this chapter that he walks in those paths, and he's going to walk in the way of the Lord. So anyway, I take it to mean what's going on is, or basically to summarize the chapter, Job is saying he will persevere until he finds God and all is made well. And that Job says God has set himself against Job, and we just read that, and that although Job is terrified at the thought that God is against him, he will not be silenced. He'll keep pleading his case, his innocence, and he'll keep living uh, in this life of integrity that he um, has been walking. So that's why he says he's going to um, push through to the darkness, or he's going to push through, I believe, and realize the hope that he had in verses 1 through 7, which is God will not turn him away eventually. He will find God, and God will receive him, vindicate him.
And the RSV um, verse 14 is slightly different from the NIV, where the NIV says, "He carries out his decree against me," and the RSV says, "For he will complete what he appoints for me, for
Yeah,
better or for
that's
worse." Whereas the NIV seems it's for worse. His decree against me.
yeah. The NIV has that's a good catch there, and the ESV also says he will complete what he appoints for me. Uh, it sounds like that verse in Philippians, that the Lord will complete what he has begun. And it is the same thought that the Lord
Yeah.
will complete what he has begun. The thing that Job is talking about, the thing that he has begun here, that is started but not complete, is the apparent animosity of God towards Job and making it and having him suffer and making him suffer. And Job, that's why Job is terrified in verse 15. He's saying, God's not going to change. He's set against me. And so I just have to endure this. I think that's the outcome of the chapter. It says, even though God terrifies me today, and it's very dark where I am right now, that one day he will receive me. And so I will just persevere here in my obedience to him. But yeah, it's clear that the NIV uses opposition, language of opposition in verses 13 and 14, right? Um, he stands alone, God stands alone. Who can oppose him, right? Verse 14, he carries out his decree against me. So the NIV has kind of highlighted this opposition, this uh, language of tension, um, whereas the more literal, like the Revised Standard or the American Standard or the New American Standard or the Christian Standard or the English Standard versions, all the standards, they're more literal. Uh, don't translate it using language of opposition like that, right? Verse 13, ESV, he is unchangeable. Who can turn him back? This is more about the character of God and the decrees of God than about opposition. And then 14, he will complete what he appoints for me. That there's no opposition language there. It's just God is God. He's going to do what God has planned to do. And so he's unchanging in his purpose. And I will be unchanging in my resolve to live rightly before him and make my case before him one day, because I have this hope that he will receive me. Um, so, so I think that, well, anyway, those are the two main views. One is Job is despairing at the end, kind of giving up. The hope is extinguished. The other view, I think, is more accurate, that Job is resolving to persevere. Um, but again, you make the judgment based on what you think the book is about, right? And where the movement is actually going in the book. So this would be an example of, you interpret the little detail uh, in regard to the bigger picture, right? Um, because textually, there's both of those views can be supported from this chapter. So Job has said, or God has, yeah, Job has said in verse 10, that's where we kind of ended up. He said, when he has tested me, I will come forth as gold. We read from First Peter before, um,
Mhm.
where where in the situation where God tests people, and so this is a situation of pressure and stress and suffering. God tests people, um, and that's he puts them on those situations so that they can shine, so that the Lord's work in their life can be evident. And so Job's using this kind of a language. He's understanding that God is testing him, right? He's saying, when he tests me, I will come forth as gold. He's putting pressure on me. Um, Gold is tested in the fire. He's in the fire, and
Mhm.
he's saying, I realize what's happening is that God is not out to destroy me. He's testing me. And so I think that supports, if anything in the text supports the view that Job is holding on to his hope all throughout the chapter, and the hope is not eclipsed, is this idea that God is testing him. And he's
Mhm.
like, well, uh, testing is only for a time, and then after
Mhm.
that is the evaluation, the reward.
Right.
So so he's understands that, or at least he's thinking about it in those terms right now. So Proverbs 17:3 says something about this. The crucible is for silver and the furnace is for gold, and the Lord tests the hearts. So again, it's in the testing like gold, it's the Peter reference, but it's also the crucible, right? And furnace. These are not happy things if they're being applied to human testing by God. This is a lot of pressure, a lot of heat, perhaps a lot of pain. And Job is using this type of language to describe his situation. And he's going to come forth as gold, he says. So he's resolved in verse 10 to,
Mhm.
or he stated what he's later going to resolve in the chapter, which is, I will persevere. Um, this is something I think, obviously, this is important for all believers. It's important for us to realize that when things happen to us that are not easy to deal with, that they are that the Lord is teaching us, testing us, making the gold of His grace shine more in our lives. Um, I was reading today in First Kings, First Kings 17, the Elijah and the widow's son. Right. So God sends Elijah to the house, and he says she will take care of you. And he shows up and he says, "Can you give me some bread?" And she says, "I'm just out here making my last meal for me and my son, and we're going to die because we're out of food, we're out of oil, we're out of everything." And Elijah says, "The Lord will take care of you. Just make something for me and feed me first." So a big test here for her. And she goes ahead and does that. And then the Lord extends her oil for whatever she needs during this drought that is going on in Israel. And she's provided for miraculously by the Lord every day for a long period of time while Elijah is there and while the drought is going on. And then one day the son dies. And the woman says to Elijah, "What happened to your blessing? I thought you were here to bless me, oh man of God." And I thought, I mean, what happens next is the Lord sends Elijah up to revive the son, to resurrect him from the dead, and he's restored to the woman. And she is blessed mightily by a great display of the Lord's grace and love and power, right? Miraculous resurrection of her son. But her first instinct was, things have been good, therefore the Lord is blessing me. Things are bad now, and so the Lord is not blessing me. He's now my enemy. Um, and but the Lord wasn't her enemy. He had just arranged a situation where she could be blessed and where he could show his strength and power and mercy and glory. And I think that that's what's going on, right? That's what's going on with Job. Job is um, God has arranged these situations in Job's life, this situation, so that God can be glorified. And this whole talk of Job's three friends, this happened to you because you were bad, misses the point entirely, right? It puts you in control. I can manipulate God. I can do a good thing and he'll do a good thing. I do a bad thing, he does a bad thing. I'm in charge. Um, Job, at this point in the dialogue, is very firmly in the God's in control still, right? That's the way he's looking at it. He's going to bring me through that, or he's going to keep doing this, and I will come through it, and he will receive me, and he will declare me vindicated. Um, so,
And the thing we keep in mind is that none of this that has happened to Job was um, a punishment or a judgment against him for anything that he did.
right.
But his friends have all along assumed that that is the case, that he has wronged the Lord.
Yeah. It's really hard uh, not to read providence, not to go. I mean, I heard a saying today that I thought was clever, but ultimately leads to the wrong conclusion. It was apparently an Old English saying about God's relationship to money, and it was you can tell what God thinks about money. Just look at the type of people He gives it to, and the implication was rich people are terrible people, right? Um, so they get away with things. They use their money to abuse other people. All kinds of stuff. That was in the context of when it was said, that's what was meant there. This is what God thinks of money. He gives it to terrible people. Um,
While
so
ignoring all that he's provided for David and Solomon.
yeah, yeah. And so, I mean, I think we often make the assumption that we can read God's providence. By providence, I mean what God does in the world. We think we can read it and go, oh, look, this thing happened to that person. This must mean X, Y, Z. And we draw some, you know, theological conclusion or uh, we go, oh, that God must be saying this about them or something like that. Or this good thing happened to me. That must be a sign. I've heard even Christians say that. This thing happened. It must be a sign.
We
Um,
judge his
this is reading
motivations.
providence. You can't do it. Yeah, you can't read providence. Um, we can read the Bible. That's what we read, and that's how we understand what God is doing. Uh, but what we understand about God's doing is that God is working out His own will, and He's bringing about His own glory. But we don't know exactly how that's going to work out in the present situation, whatever that situation is. Um, but we know it's true that God is working out His will for His own glory, and so we just need to be confident, right, that God is in control. Um, so uh, Jeremiah 17, more about being tested. The Lord says, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately sick. Who can understand it? I, the Lord, search the heart and test the mind to give to every man according to his ways, according to the fruit of his deeds, which is not comforting at all given what was said in verse 9. But but the Lord tests the heart. And if he's just testing your heart, your fallen heart, when he puts you through it, you're not going to come out good. But the Lord gives you his spirit and changes your heart and makes you fortified to endure. And so when he puts you in a difficult situation, you are enduring and you're being tested by the difficult situation, but you endure and you will come out like gold, to use Job's words there. So, so, so another implication of the view of Job 23 that I have is that Job, um, he's clinging to this hope that God will eventually, in the end, receive him, and which means that this seeming animosity is only seeming, right? It's just apparent and it's temporary. And so Job has used and will use again God's against me type of language. But if he is holding on to hope that God will receive him, then this means this animosity is only temporary and it's really only uh, if since it's true that Job did not sin, then the animosity is apparent. On the other hand, later on in the book, Job actually does sin, and God's wrath against him is real. It's not just apparent, but it is temporary. Um, so Psalm 66, 8 through 12. Bless our God, O peoples, let the sound of his praise be heard, who has kept our soul among the living and not let our feet slip. For you, O God, have tested us. You have tried us as silver is tried. You brought us into the net. You laid a crushing burden on our backs. You let men ride over our heads. We went through the fire and through the water, yet you have brought us out to a place of abundance. This is what Job is hoping to be able to say at the end, that the Lord has brought him out to a place of abundance. And this psalm is really helpful to us, I think, because um, it tells us. I mean, this is a psalm of God's people who went through a hard time, and God brought them out into abundance. And so, if you're entering a hard time, or if you're in the darkness, and you can look at this and go, "Okay, He's going to bring me through. He's going to bring me through." Um, what is Psalm 23, right? Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff comfort me. And then He has set a table for me in the presence of my enemies. The Lord is with his people, even in the darkness of the valley of death. He brings them through it. Um, so I think that's what's going on in that chapter. So I didn't have a lot of other chapters, other Bible verses to go to for the end of chapter 23, and I had even less to go through in chapter 24. I know that's unusual. So if we'll move into 24 unless there's anything anybody wants to say about 23. So pause here for a minute. Anybody have anything?
No.
Okay. All right. Chapter 24. I'll read that. I'm going to read in the NIV also. So this one is kind of a change. Now Job is going to be talking about the position of his friends, and he's going to summarize it. Uh, and I'll point it out when he does. Um, he's going to summarize their position. He's going to talk about it, and he's going to offer a refutation. Why does the Almighty not set times for judgment? Why must those who know him look in vain for such days? Here's the main criticism of his friend's view, or at least a portion of his friend's view. His criticism is God doesn't keep any kind of regular schedule for judging people. You can't you can't go, oh, it's Tuesday, God's going to judge you, you know. Um,
Yeah.
it's no kind of regular schedule at all. Sometimes people die in their wickedness, right? Sometimes they're judged in this life. How do you know what's going to happen? It's unreliable, right? God uh doesn't keep to any kind of schedule that I can know, Job says. He goes on to describe wicked people. There are those who move boundary stones. They pasture flocks they have stolen. They drive away the orphan's donkey and take the widow's ox in pledge. So they're preying on people who are usually, they're the the poor and the most vulnerable people in the society, orphans, widows. I mean, um, these are the people that the Israelites are specifically charged with taking care of to show their covenant faithfulness. So these people that Job is describing are kind of the opposite of a covenant keeper, right? They're the massive covenant breakers preying on God's uh, people and the most vulnerable in the society. Verse 3, they drive away the orphan's donkey and they take the widow's ox in pledge. They thrust the needy from the path and force all the poor of the land into hiding. Like wild donkeys in the desert, the poor go about their labor of foraging food. The wasteland provides food for their children. So it's a picture you can see in your mind of somebody going through a wasteland area, desert area, and just picking up whatever they can find, scrounging and feeding their family. Saying these wicked people steal from these people and oppress these people. And these people need our pity and our help and our prayers. Verse 6, they gather fodder in the fields and glean in the vineyards of the wicked. So the wicked have vineyards, but the poor don't. They have to just pick up the remaining off the ground. Lacking clothes, they spend the night naked. They have nothing to cover themselves in the cold. They're drenched by mountain rains and hug the rocks for lack of shelter. The fatherless child is snatched from the breast. The infant of the poor is seized for a debt. Lacking clothes, they go about naked. They carry the sheaves, but still go hungry. Okay, so this is a picture of working in the wicked man's field, harvesting his grain, and not getting anything, not getting sustenance from it. The wicked person is so greedy that he's not helping, not sharing. They crush olives among the terraces, they tread the wine presses, yet suffer thirst. The groans of the dying arise from the city, and the souls of the wounded cry out for help. And here it is, but God charges no one with wrongdoing. Okay, this is the terrible reality that Job sees. This is why he starts with, why doesn't God keep a regular schedule? I mean, shouldn't he be judging these people? Shouldn't we see it? How come we don't see it? That's what he's asking. God charges no one with wrongdoing. There are those who rebel against the light, who do not know its ways or stay in its paths. Now, this is contrasted with what Job had said earlier in chapter 23 about walking, about the way he walks. In verse 10, he says, so what I just read, I believe it was verse 13, right? Verse 13 of chapter 24, Job says about the wicked, there are those who rebel against the light, who do not know its ways or stay in its paths. And then if you go back to verse 10, I think it was, of chapter 23, Job speaking about himself. He knows the way I take. When he has tested me, I will come forth as gold. My feet have closely followed his steps. I have kept to his way without turning aside. So the wicked don't know his way. The wicked step off his path. And Job says, I'm on the path. I'm going to stay on the path, even though God is afflicting me and I can't see the end of this. I mean, I can't see through this darkness, but I know at the end he will vindicate me. Says the wicked step off the path. They don't know the path. Um, 14, chapter 24, verse 14. When daylight is gone, the murderer rises up, kills the poor and needy, and in the night steals forth like a thief. The eye of the adulterer watches for dusk. He thinks, no eye will see me, and he keeps his face concealed. In the dark, thieves break into houses, but by day they shut themselves in. They want nothing to do with the light. This is all true and also metaphor, right? They don't want anything to do with God. They want to live out their wickedness, whatever their wicked desires are. They don't care for the light. They turn away from it. Um, Verse 17, for all of them, midnight is their morning. They make friends with the terrors of darkness. Now he's going to quote his friends. He's going to summarize what they said. He's not actually quoting them, but verse 18 um, and following is a summary of his friend's position. Yet they are foam on the surface of the water. Their portion of the land is cursed, so that no one goes to the vineyards. As heat and drought snatch away the melted snow, so the grave snatches away those who have sinned. The womb forgets them. The worm feasts on them. The wicked are no longer remembered, but are broken down like a tree. They prey on the barren and childless woman, and to the widow they show no kindness. But God drags away the mighty by his power. Though they become established, they have no assurance of life. So the first couple of verses there, he's paraphrasing 18 and 19, 20. He paraphrases his friends who have said, their wickedness only lasts a short time. Yeah, okay, they did these bad things, but God will get them. You watch. God will. They're like foam on the surface of the water, just gone. God will take them away. Their land will be cursed, right? They won't be able to get anything out of it. It won't be profitable to them, and nobody will come and work in their vineyards. But you know, we know, and Job knows, that's actually not what happens. Job, Job says. So Job then says in verse 22. Job now is talking about his own view. God drags away the mighty by his power. Though they become established, they have no assurance of life. He may let them rest in a feeling of security, but his eyes are on their ways. For a little while, they are exalted, and then they are gone. They are brought low and gathered up like all others. They are cut off like heads of grain. What Job is saying here is not identical with what his friends have said. His friends have said they're here for a little while, meaning temporarily, or in the temporal sphere. They only are wicked and enjoy their wickedness for a short time, a couple of months, a year, short time. Job's using a little while in comparison with eternity. He's saying God lets them become established. They, they, what's he say? He says he may let them rest in a feeling of security, right? He lets them become established. They are wicked and they profit from it and they become secure and their life is good. They have no trouble, but they don't have any assurance. We're not talking existentially. We're not saying, Job's not saying that the wicked don't feel assured. He's saying objectively they have no assurance. Their prosperity is no assurance of that God is favorable toward them. They will die, and then they're wicked, just like everybody else, right? Verse 24, they are brought low and gathered up like all others, just like everybody else. They're going to die, and God will then judge them. So Job's basic argument in chapter 24 is you guys say that the wicked only prosper for a short time, meaning temporal uh, time, not compared to eternity, just compared to this lifetime. They prosper for a short time, and then God cuts them down, and everybody can see it and knows they were wicked, and everybody forgets their name and learns the lesson that we shouldn't be wicked because God cuts people off in their wickedness. Job says that's not true at all. Just look around. There are people who do the worst type of abuse of the people around them. They abuse, they take advantage of the poor, the widow, the fatherless, the orphan, the needy. the hurt, the sick. These are all the people he lists. The starving, the destitute. These wicked people walk all over him, and God doesn't do a thing about it. That's what he says. Just look. Um, so he's, focusing on one thing. He could point to, oh yeah, I see this guy got judged in his wickedness. He could point to that, but it's that those are the rare cases. The normal way that God works is to do what Job is describing. The wicked get away with their wickedness. And Job is going to be summarized later on in the book as saying there's no profit to serving God. And it might be the case that what Job says is if you're looking for profit in this life, there's no profit guaranteed. But there certainly is profit in serving God if you consider the next life. So in this, the argument that Job is making is the apparent indifference of God. Because on your view, how can we explain a God who lets wicked people get away with stuff? You don't have an afterlife. On my view, makes sense, right? So I have some passages about how Job's experience that he's describing is not unique. The Bible mentions it lots of different places. And the first one I want to look at is Habakkuk, chapter 1, 2 through 4. Habakkuk says, O Lord, how long shall I cry for help and you will not hear? Or cry to you violence and you will not save? Why do you make me see iniquity? And why do you idly look at wrong? Destruction and violence are before me, strife and contention arise. So the law is paralyzed and justice never goes forth. For the wicked surround the righteous, so justice goes forth perverted. Habakkuk is saying, I'm sure you all caught it, right? He's saying, wicked things are happening. Wicked people are doing wicked things. And you're doing nothing. And I've been crying out to you. Where are you? What is your schedule for judgment? Because it doesn't make any sense to me. That's what the prophet is saying, right? Job is saying this. He's saying, it's common experience. Just look around. Psalm 10, verse 1. Why, O Lord, do you stand far away? Why do you hide yourself in times of trouble? The wicked are oppressing me. Where are you? It's the C.S. Lewis observation about grief, right? He said when things are great, you can pray and everything's good and God's there and you have a feeling of his presence and you are cognizant of his answers to your prayers and he's hearing you and you have that conviction. But then, man, he says, when something terrible happens, you cry out to God and it's like your words just hit the ceiling. He says, it's like the door is slammed in your face and there's a sign that says no admittance. And is where is God? You pray in your grief, God hear me, and it's just silence. And so what are we supposed to do, when that happens? Right? I mean, everybody's had that happen, right? Has anybody not had that happen and is looking forward to that happening to them?
No. Yes and no. Yes, I have, and no, I don't.
That's right.
Yes.
I'm not sure that maybe somebody in this group handled it rightly, but I think probably most people handled it kind of the way Habakkuk does, kind of the way the psalmist did.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you?
Yeah.
Job has said, and we've read it lots of times, Job has said, God is silent. Where is God? I can't find him. I mean, he hasn't said it in an accusatory voice, but he said it in a God's not listening type of It's a fact. And when Elihu shows up in chapter 32, the first thing he's going to say to Job after he rebukes Job's friends for not making Job, for not having an argument that was cogent, he's going to say to Job, why do you keep saying God isn't speaking? God speaks to you all the time. He's speaking in your suffering. And so he's going to elaborate on that. I think we miss that, right? I think we miss that. We go, God was speaking to me this way, and that's the only way God can speak to me. And then God changes it, and now you're suffering. And you go, where are you? Where are you? And it's like, he's still there. Just you are not attuned to hearing him in that way. And we have to go, I know you're still here. Open my eyes, open my ears, open my heart, because I know that you don't abandon your people. And like Elihu is right, you are always with your people. And if I can't hear you and I can't see you, it's not your fault. It's mine. So open my eyes. So we need to, it's really easy to say it in hindsight, right? It's how we need to be when things are hard. We need to go, I did it wrong the last time. I'm going to do it this way this time. Because there probably will be another time because, you're being tested. You need to learn. So anyway, Psalm 22, 1 to 22, which might be the whole chapter, I think. My God, my God. Oh, 1 and 2, actually. 22, 1 and 2. My God, and my God, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me from the words of my groaning? Oh my God, I cry by day, but you do not answer, and by night, but I find no rest. Here's Jesus having the common experience, the feeling of abandonment. The prayers going to the ceiling, locked door of heaven. That's what he's experiencing on our behalf here. Father did turn his back on him, but I don't think the Father ever turns his back on you. So, because of Jesus, he doesn't turn his back on. Yeah. So then Ecclesiastes 4, we just have a few minutes. We'll just do these last two passages. Ecclesiastes 4, 1 through 3 again. And so we're talking about the wicked getting away with wickedness. Again, I saw all the oppressions that are done under the sun. And behold, the tears of the oppressed, and they had no one to comfort them. On the side of their oppressors there was power, and there was no one to comfort them. And I thought the dead who are already dead more fortunate than the living who are still alive. But better than both is he who has not yet been, and has not seen the evil deeds that are done under the sun. This is the man with the most resources of any other, more than anybody else, right? And he's saying, these times of darkness are so bad, it would be better not even to see them, to be born to see them. So bad. And then Revelation 6, 9 and 10. When he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the witness they had borne. They cried out with a loud voice, O sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long before you will judge and avenge your blood on those who dwell on the earth? I think they were probably praying that while they were still on the earth. This is a continuation of deliver us from our enemies, right? This is it's remarkable to think about it, right? They're praying this, I believe, some version of this prayer while they're being persecuted. And they are martyred. Job could have added to the list. They killed God's people and God does nothing, right? That would have been appropriate in the list that Job gave. I mean, that if you're working in a closed system like Job's friends are, that has no eternity in it, then the death of any martyr is damning against the goodness of God. But yet, this is how God acts in the world, right? This is the normal thing. The wicked get away with stuff, the righteous suffer. And that's because we follow the suffering Savior who went to death by the will of God and then was exalted. And so God has ordained that the lives of his people are patterned after the life of his Son, and that he is glorified in sustaining them through the suffering. Martyrs are the best of all testimonies, the most golden of all testimonies to the Lord, which is really ironic, isn't it?
Mhm.
I mean, it's really ironic.
Mhm.
People don't go, oh, he believed in Jesus and look what happened. Ha, I'm not going to believe in Jesus. They go, he kept believing in Jesus even though they tortured him, even though they killed him. He would not give up his faith. There must be something real about this. The greatest witness. So, so when God puts us into suffering and we complain, uh, we are not seeing what we have no we can't complain really because we don't know what God is doing, but we do know that whatever God is doing, it is good. So 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 anyway, Job's argument against his friends is God, the world is not all tidy the way that you
Mhm.
argue. God is doing something that is beyond this temporal sphere. And if you just look at what God is doing in this world, well, then it's totally out of control because widows get abused and people in need die of starvation and the righteous lose everything and God's people, some of them get killed. These don't make any sense if this is all there is, right? So Job has no problem with those things. He's not saying these things happen and it's a big problem for me. He's saying these things happen and it's a big problem for you. He refutes your view. My view, I can account for that because my God is greater than this time, than a temporal creation. Um, so, so that's where we are. So we're almost at the end of chapter 24, it looks like. Um, we might have actually got to the end, right? I think we did. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, there were just maybe two more passages. Uh, give me 5 more minutes. We'll just read those passages. So James 5, verse 3, talking about testing again, or about, yeah, actually, this is about the wicked. Your gold and your silver have corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you, and will eat your flesh like fire. You have laid up treasure in the last days. James is not saying, oh, the gold and silver in your hands, you wicked person, has actually corroded. Physically, it's deteriorating and it's burning your flesh or something like that. He's not saying that at all. He's saying your use of your wealth has laid up for you a treasure, scare quotes, a treasure in heaven, which is the wrath of God. He will judge you.
Mhm.
Um, can't get away with it. Matthew 12:13-21. He said to the man, let's see, wait, did I even do the right one? I didn't do the right verse. We're not going to go there. Okay. We'll just end with James. So the next time we're together in Job, we'll pick up in chapter 25. I'll get the outline up online. Next Thursday, we won't be meeting. I'll send out a email about that. And perhaps for those people in Washington, we can get together sometime when Carol and I are out there. We'll send out an email. My mom and I, or me, will send out an email once we decide on a good time and see if we can get together. So let me ask if anybody has anything you want to add before I turn off the recording.
Well, as far as the gold goes, I believe God allows us to go through these testing just like gold, so that the impurities in our lives rise to the top, and He removes them to make us more like Him.
Amen. Amen. I think that's true. And I think that's why the image is used. Something that people can understand and see that.
Right.
All right. Let me turn off the recording here.